Hello and welcome back to Crooked Yarns. In today's tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to create a slouch beanie. This video is for those of you who are right-handed and I will be using US terminology. If you need the left-handed version or UK terminology, you will find a link to these videos in the description below, along with links to the materials and tools that I'm using today. In this tutorial, I'm going to be using the following. The yarn that I'm going to be using today is by Woolcraft. It's a double knit weight yarn and a 100-gram ball has approximately 300 metres. You can substitute this for any other double knit yarn. For my tutorial, I used approximately 70% of the ball. You'll need a pair of scissors or thread clippers to trim down the tails of your yarn. You will need a blunt darning needle and a sharp darning needle. And if you wish to use them, you will need 2 stitch markers. I used 2 crochet hooks for this tutorial. The first one that I will be using for the brim of the hat is a 3.5mm crochet hook. For the main body of the hat, I will be using a 4mm crochet hook. If you wish to use the same items as me, you will find links to these in the description below. So, without further ado, let's get on with the tutorial. We are going to start by making the brim of our hat. You're going to need your 3.5mm crochet hook and we're going to make a slip knot. You're then going to chain 11. If you need any help or guidance on how to make a slip knot and chain, please see the link in the top right hand corner of the screen now for my tutorial. So now that we have our chain of 11, we're going to do a half double crochet in each stitch down, but we're going to miss out the first chain. Yarn over, skip the first chain and half double crochet into the next chain along. Continue this all the way to the end and you should end up with 10 half double crochets. Again, if you need any help or guidance creating a half double crochet, please see the link in the top right hand corner of the screen now. We've now completed our first row. Remember to count your stitches after the first row to make sure that you haven't missed any chains. We're now going to turn our work and we're going to be stitching into the back loop of the previous stitches. If you look at the top of the stitches from your previous row, you will see the V shape with the front post and the back post of the stitch. You will be placing your crochet hook into the back post only. So place your hook onto your yarn and chain 1. As you can see, this is the back loop of the stitch that we will be working into. Yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop only and make your half double crochet. After working your second stitch, you can place a stitch marker if you need to. You may find this helpful in identifying the last stitch on the row, and it will also help to keep your work nice and straight. Continue along to the end of the row. You should have 10 half double crochets by the end of the row. Whilst I speed through this bit, why not hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon so that you can keep up to date with my newest tutorials. So, now we've completed our second row. If you wish, you can count along again to make sure that you still have 10 half double crochets. We're at the point now where we're going to repeat this row, and this is going to create the brim of our hat. Crocheting into the back loop only creates the rib effect that will form the brim of your hat. So we're going to start on our third row by chaining 1 and turning your work. After your second stitch, remember to place your stitch marker in your first stitch so that you know where the edge of your work is. for a small to medium hat, you're going to need a total of 58 rows. For a medium to large hat, you're going to need a total of 60 rows, and for an extra large hat, you're going to need 62 rows. I've now completed the brim of my hat, and I've done a small to medium size, which is 58 rows. As you can see, working into the back loop of the stitch creates the nice rib effect that we're going to be using for our hat. The next thing we need to do is stitch our ends together. So you want to bring them together so that they meet. We're going to be placing slip stitches into the row that we've just completed and the chain row that we started with. If you're struggling to identify the last chain from your starting row, count back from your slip knot. You should count back 10 stitches. Insert your hook through both ends of your work, yarn over and pull through a slip stitch. Continue this all the way along, and don't forget to count along as you go so that you don't miss any stitches. This seam is going to be on the inside of your work and creates an invisible join. Once you've completed this slip stitch row, pull up a long loop and turn your work the right way around. As you can see, our seam is now invisible, and if you wanted to make just a headband, this would be a good place to stop. Now that we have our work the right way around, we're going to be working in continuous rounds across the top of the brim. Because we've turned the brim of the hat round, you'll find that your yarn goes through the centre of the brim, so you're going to need to put it through in order to continue working. This small tail of yarn that we have left over from the beginning can now be woven into the stitches behind. I like to use a slightly sharper darning needle in order to do this. I find that this holds the tails in place easier and stops them from unravelling. You don't want to pull this too tight, because what it will do is it will start to curve your brim. You need to make sure that there is no tightness across the top of the brim so that the ends meet up. If you have pulled it too tight, simply pull back through slightly until you're happy with the tension. Then we can snip the tail, and that's our brim completed. We're now going to start making the main body of the hat. To do this, we're going to continue working in the same yarn. We're not going to cut and restart. I will now be changing to my 4mm crochet hook. The first row that we're going to be doing, row 1, will be a single crochet into the top of each of the previous rows from the brim of the hat. you look here, you can see that this is the last row from the brim of the hat. This is where we will place our first stitch. You're going to continue to stitch around until you get back to the starting point. We're now going to be working our stitches into the rows of the brim. These rows are worked in rounds and you won't need to turn your work. We're going to need to increase the number of stitches along the edge of the brim of the hat. And we're going to do this by increasing one stitch every 4 rows. If you want, place a stitch marker into the first stitch of your round so that you know when to stop. If you are making a small to medium hat like me, you will find that you increase the amount of stitches in your round up to 72. This means that you should have an extra 14 stitches by the time you've completed the first round. Now that you are coming to the end of row 1, let's complete the last few stitches. We're going to place a slip stitch into the first stitch from our round. This completes row 1. If you pull up a long loop when you've created your slip stitch, you can then pull the back of the loop, which closes the slip stitch off and secures it in place. For our next row, we're going to complete a round of half double crochet stitches. Place one half double crochet stitch into every stitch around. We're now coming to the end of round 2 and I have 3 stitches left. Let's place 3 half double crochets in these stitches. You are now going to place a slip stitch into the top of the first stitch of round 2. Once again, I like to pull up a long loop with my slip stitch and pull it tight with the back of the loop. We're now going to start on round 3. Round 3 is simply double crochets that create a cross pattern. The first thing we're going to do is chain 3. You're then going to skip the stitch with the chain 3 and skip the next stitch. And you're going to place a double crochet into the stitch after that. Once you've created your first double crochet, you're going to place your next double crochet into the stitch that we had previously skipped, working behind the first double crochet. You've now created your first crossover stitch. To continue, you're going to skip the next stitch and place a double crochet into the stitch after. I would advise that when doing the crossover stitch, pull your yarn up a little bit looser so that the stitches aren't too tight. We're now coming to the end of round 3. As you can see, I still have a couple of stitches left, so let's get on and do those. I'm then going to show you how to hide the chain 3 so that you have a more invisible seam. Remember to skip your next stitch and place your double crochet into the stitch after. Your following double crochet is then worked into the stitch behind. Your last stitch is going to be worked so that we hide the chain 3. You're going to skip this stitch and you're going to work the first double crochet into the stitch that has the chain 3 attached. When inserting your hook and pulling up a loop, remember not to crochet around the back of the chain 3. Make sure that you pull your loop through underneath the chain 3 so that it remains at the back of your work. Place your last double crochet into the previously skipped stitch, and then you're going to slip into the top of the first double crochet around 3, completely missing the chain 3. As you can see, we've now completed round 3, and the chain 3 is hidden behind the other stitches. This creates an invisible increase. We're now going to start on round 4. Round 4 is going to be worked into the back 2 loops of the previous stitches. As you can see, this is the top stitch, this is the back loop, and this is the second back loop. We're going to be working through both of these back loops. This gives a firmer hold on the stitches that you will be placing. We're going to chain 1 and we're going to place half double crochets in each of the 2 back loops all the way around. Once again, you can see that we're going to be placing our stitch into the back 2 loops from the previous round. Continue placing these stitches until you reach the end of the round. As you can see, we're now coming to the end of round 4. Once you've placed your last stitch, you're going to slip stitch into the top of the first half double crochet from your round. As you can see, we've now completed 4 rounds for the main body of our hat. You're now going to repeat rows 3 and 4. If you're making a small to medium hat, you're going to continue until your work measures 18 centimeters from the top of the brim. If you're making a medium to large hat, it needs to measure 20 centimeters. And if you're making an extra large hat, it needs to measure 22 centimeters. As you can see, I've now finished the main body of my hat, and I just need to complete my last few stitches in order to finish off. You need to make sure that your last row is a half double crochet row. When you've completed your last half double crochet, slip stitch into the top of the first stitch of the round. You can see how well this pattern works up, and if we place our tape measure, you can see that my work from the top of the brim measures approximately 18 centimetres. Don't worry if your work is a little bit over this, it just adds to the slouch of the beanie. We're now going to cinch the top of the hat together. This creates the gathered effect. First, we're going to need to pull up a long tail, approximately 12 to 18 inches. You can then cut your yarn and get rid of the excess. You now need to thread your yarn onto a blunt darning needle. Now the reason we do this is so that when you are weaving your yarn in and out, it doesn't separate the yarn fibres. This will make it harder to pull if this happens. You're going to take your needle and you're going to weave through every second stitch. There's no reason to weave through every single stitch, as this again will just make things harder to pull. Continue like this all the way around the top of the hat. We now need to gently pull the working yarn in order to cinch close the top of the hat. This needs to be done slowly so that we don't snap the yarn. You're going to continue doing this until the hole is almost closed. When you get to the point that the hole is about the width of your finger, pass your needle through to the inside of your hat. Once you've brought your needle through, pull up your yarn and turn your hat inside out. Continue to pull your working yarn until the circle is closed. If you find once you've pulled your yarn that the gap hasn't completely closed, this is okay, it's just due to the number of stitches that you have. What we're going to do now is run our needle around the inside of the stitches to give a firmer closure. At this point, I like to change to a sharper darning needle, and the reason why is because I like to work my yarn through the fibres at the end in order to make sure that they don't come undone. When finishing off, I find that if you gather the ruffles on the inside and work your needle around them, bringing your yarn in and pulling it tight, creates a nice gathered effect that you'll be able to see on the outside of your hat. If we turn our hat over, you will now see that the gap is completely closed, and all we need to do is tie our yarn off. The way that I like to do this is by inserting my needle and creating a loop of yarn so that I have two ends to tie off. Leave a long loop free and create a couple of standard knots. The last knot that I create is a surgeon's knot. This is where the loop is passed twice over rather than once, and it creates a tight bind off. You can now cut the loose ends of your yarn, and we have completed our crochet beanie. You can turn up the brim and create a normal beanie, or you can leave it down and have a slouch beanie. So, now that you've watched my tutorial on how to make a slouch beanie, let me know in the comments below how you got on, or if you have any questions. Likewise, you can join me over on my Facebook page to share your creations. If you found this tutorial helpful, please like and subscribe to keep up to date with my latest releases, and I will see you again soon.